Okay, so I will do roll call. Greg Braille. Not here yet. Phil Burton.
Bill,
Here, I'm sorry. Muting issues.
Tony Carrasco. Not here yet. In Yang Cho.
Here.
Larry Klein.
Here.
Nadia Nayak. Nadia is not here tonight. Keith Reckdahl.
Here.
Dave Shen.
He'll be late. He wrote us and said he'll be late.
Oh, okay. Carrie Templeton.
Here.
All right, you have a quorum.
Okay. Members of the public, welcome. Our chair, Nadia Nayak, will not be able to be here today, so we're going to proceed without her, but she'll be here next week. The first item we have after roll call is to hear from the public and oral communications on any item which is not on the agenda. The only item really on the agenda today is the traffic report. So we welcome comments on anything else except the title of the traffic report. We have 2-minute limit, so please sign in and the clerk will call your names and we'll proceed accordingly. Do we have any members who wish to speak to us?
Looks like there's 7 hands raised.
Will the clerk please call the names in order?
Hello there. Yeah, this is Jose. We have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people with raised hands. First is Kathy Jordan, and you may be allowed to talk. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. I think I did unmute myself. I'd like to talk in general about, first of all, let me state my opposition to closing Churchill Avenue, but I'd like to talk in general about the applicability of discussing recommendations for grade crossings, grade separations, in light of so many of the circumstances that have modified the way that people are working, commuting, and living. In the last several days, several other companies announced that they will permit workers to stay working from home indefinitely. Atlassian was another company that added to this mix, has offices in San Francisco, for example. Just today or yesterday, REI announced that a company headquarters in the state of Washington that they had just finished constructing, that they will no longer use that corporate headquarters, that they were planning on moving all their workers into, based on people working from home, telecommuting, and changed working patterns. Given the memo from the chair discussing the impetus for grade separations was due to increased service and frequency of Caltrain, which now looks as though it is not so needed in light of these changed patterns, a loss of 95% of ridership, less vehicle traffic and congestion, as well as projections for population growth that no longer, based on recent data, hold true. I think we'd like to ask the EXAC committee, after all of its very hard work, to take all of this into consideration and to share all the knowledge that it gained, but not make any lasting recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eileen Fagan, followed by Ken Joy.
Before Eileen starts, I just want to remind the public, I know most of you know this, but members of the committee are not permitted to respond to any comments that are made during this oral communications. Ms. Fagan?
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Before you start my 2-minute time, we had talked to Sarah about having people, and Nadia, it's unfortunate she's not here, but to have others cede their time so that we could share the PowerPoint that we submitted, which is about the Southgate survey results.
Yes, that's allowable.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. If it pleases the chair, we'll take that at the end then.
So it's you, and do you have the lists?
I'm sorry, so we'll take that at the end of this oral communications. So yes, we do have a list.
Okay, but
So I'll wait then.
let's move forward then.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so next we have Ken Joy. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I want to comment upon one of the informational attachments that's not going to be discussed at the meeting today. You have layouts for the 3 undercrossings, yet there's not a profile drawn for Meadow Drive, which I had noted was an issue earlier in your process. I'm surprised that it's not visible now because the lack of that profile means we can't accurately assess the proposal. I hope that that is a small oversight and that the profile is available somewhere else. I'm just surprised not to see it in the packet today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Terry Latch, since Stephen Carlson. All right, just a second. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, thank you. I'll comment to the survey really quickly. First of all, I just want to thank the group for doing it. I saw the results and I know you're going to present it later, so I won't get into that. When you look at that survey, I think it's pretty clear. There are 2 things that kind of float to the surface, and that's the a partial underpass and the closure of Churchill. And she'll get into the details of the numbers. As I look through it, you know, all cards on the table. I live on Churchill. I'd like Churchill closed. I don't want the people on Churchill affected as negatively as they will be by the partial underpass. Plus, I don't want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on something I don't think we need. And so bottom line is, when you look at the fact that those 2 are kind of like, you know, way above viaduct and doing nothing, I would say that we have to look at the negative aspects of those 2 options. And there's a significant amount of negative aspects to the viaduct. It was definitely not preferred, but there are also significant aspects to both closing Churchill and to the partial underpass. But the partial underpass negative aspects really affect the people along the train route in a severe way, whereas the problems with closing Churchill are much more minor and don't cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'd really like us to look at how the survey helps us decide, and leveraging the survey to look at those effects, and the fact that the partial underpass has a much more negative effect on the people on Churchill than the closure of Churchill has on everybody else. And I understand there's an effect, and I understand it's not ideal. I don't think there's anything here that's ideal for anyone. But fundamentally, we got to pick the one that makes the most sense given the reports and given the cost. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Lisa Neeson, followed by Richard Perky. Just a second here. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, the train line is an important connector for Palo Altans to San Francisco and points north and south, but it also splits our town in 2. The Churchill crossing serves to unite all of Palo Alto. Please don't disrupt Palo Alto's feng shui by closing Churchill. Southgate is a quiet neighborhood with easy access to Palo Alto's many amenities. That's why we chose to live here. Closing Churchill would turn Southgate into an island within Palo Alto. We don't want to live in a suburb of Palo Alto or a place not viewed by others as part of this community because people can't get here. Before raising our 19-year-old twin boys in Southgate, my husband and I didn't understand the importance of the greater Palo Alto community. We didn't know that in 2020, some of our most important friends would be the Walter Hayes kindergarten families we met decades ago who live in Community Center, Leland Manor, and Old Palo Alto. We have bonded with these families not only through the shared experience of raising our children, but also by the real and perceived easy access to each other afforded by the roads leading to our respective homes. While some supporting the Churchill closure have called my neighbors and I lazy for wanting to retain direct access to Walter Hayes and Green Middle Schools, in my experience, it is an essential amenity for Southgate. Without this direct connection, I couldn't have gotten my special needs son to school, and it would have been too dangerous for my neurotypical son to ride his bike to Greenhead Park Boulevard at Pierce Park, not been closed to cars. One respondent to the Southgate survey warned that the unintended consequences of closing Churchill would be to physically and mentally untether Southgate from its current association with Old Palo Alto. I would add the consequences of closing Churchill would be to disconnect Southgate from the entire town, including schools, library, emergency services, and City Hall. As Southgate residents, we are part of Palo Alto. Don't marginalize us by closing Churchill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Richard Perkey, followed by David Kennedy. Let me just do this. Please unmute yourself, Richard.
Hi, thank you for taking my comments. First, I live in the Old Palo Alto neighborhood on Tennyson Avenue. And I have generally, as you've looked at various options, favored the closure of Churchill as the most cost-effective option that actually does the best for general transportation across the rail corridor, east and west. So I made those comments in writing and before, but today I wanted to just briefly mention one element of the partial underpass plan that concerns me and that I don't think is adequately addressed in the fact sheets and the matrix, and that is that in the process of building the partial underpass, you widen the intersection and both north and south of Alma, moving the street 10 to 12 feet closer to homes that face Alma. So this, in the process, you kind of eliminate the current 10-foot buffer zone between the northbound traffic lanes and sidewalks for the 2 blocks north of Churchill and the 2 blocks south of Churchill. This puts the sidewalk directly on with no buffer between the curb and the traffic lane. This is an arterial to 35 miles an hour. It is the truck route, which all traffic routes through to northern Palo Alto from San Antonio up to up Alma. And I feel it's causing it would cause a dangerous circumstance that really needs to be examined more thoroughly before this option is considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have David Kennedy, followed by Eduardo Latch. Let me just unmute here. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry I missed the last XCAP meeting, but I understand there was an interesting proposal put out there, offered, which is do a pilot study by temporarily closing Churchill and trying to see what happens with traffic patterns. I know we're in unusual times with the pandemic, COVID-19, all of this, and traffic levels are quite a bit different than they have been. Who knows where they're going to come back, but possibly the results of a temporary closure for the next year or two could be adjusted and determine what effect that might have. For many of us, we think it's going to have much more of an effect than the traffic models have projected so far. The one other thing I'd like to comment, and this really relates to Churchill Crossing as well, Because I'm just thankful I don't live on Kellogg Street, Kellogg Avenue. That's going to be a very different area if the partial underpass is done and the underpass to get to from the east side to the west side goes in on Kellogg. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Eduardo Latch. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank again the XCAP members for the very thorough work that they've done. The matrices and all the information is looking great. I do have a question and then a comment. The question is, I'd love to understand how these chapters fit together. I've been reading the chapters 4s and chapter 6s, and I would just love to understand how they fit together so that we can make comments on them. And then the comment that I want to make is that thank you for the survey. I've seen the results of the survey. I know it's coming shortly. It looks like from the survey that the underpass is marginally favored over closing Churchill. And what I'm also noticing in the matrices is that we have some marginal benefits with, one or the other, but yet we have some very important existential critical differences in results if you close Churchill versus an underpass or a viaduct. A viaduct is existentially critical for people in Mariposa. An underpass is existentially critical for the safety of kids, the safety of everybody in Southgate and in Churchill. Whereas I think closing Churchill, based on the data that we have for the traffic and the mitigations on Embarcadero and Oregon, plus various forms of mitigating the bicycle traffic, you get a result that is significantly better without existentially and critically affecting people on either Mariposa or Castilleja or Churchill. And so I encourage to now also think about that, property issues, right-of-ways, and so on. So thank you for the great work, and keep it up, and we look forward to your recommendations. Bye.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers for this section.
I think you want to go back up to Mr. Carlson.
Sure, just a second. Mr. Carlson, just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me? And I don't know if you can. Are you able to see me?
Yeah. Can we get the slideshow showing? We're not going to be able to see you, but we can show the slideshow.
Okay.
Just give us 1 second to get it up.
I'm just going to give the intro here. You go. That's perfect. Thank you. So Steve Carlson from Portola Avenue and several of us from Southgate will present the results of a neighborhood survey. No neighborhood is more impacted by potential change to the Churchill intersection than Southgate. And yet the majority of the neighborhood has not been directly represented in this process. Knowing that there's strong interest in the issue, we had helped to raise awareness for the town hall meeting that was scheduled at Palo Alto High School in late February. And we had anticipated a significant turnout from the neighborhood. Unfortunately, that meeting was canceled due to the pandemic. Even though Zoom meetings have resumed, this format's difficult to engage with for some, and attendance has been limited to a few. We know that community input is vital to XCAP's role, and we're hoping to assist in that process by sharing this feedback from our neighborhood. As individuals who helped to launch this survey, we may each have our own views, but our goal was to put those personal views aside and reach out to all residents. We chose a neutral name for our group in order to encourage full participation so that people wouldn't feel that they needed to be for this or for that in order to participate. Communication was to all neighbors. We did not reach out separately to subsets of neighbors with particular views. Knowing that we cannot speak for everyone, our goal was to give all residents of the neighborhood their own voice. You have received the email we sent to each resident surveyed. If despite our best attempts to be objective, there's any critique, please consider the process we will describe and the questions which were asked. Because there can be strong feelings on various sides of this issue, we're glad to share the more detailed data out of the SurveyMonkey tool with neighbors or XCAP. In sharing these data, we hope to provide XCAP with valuable feedback from the neighborhood, and we hope XCAP finds it helpful as part of your community outreach mission, both in terms of engagement as well as useful feedback. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eileen Fagan, who will provide more detail and walk through the results.
Hey, Eileen, you can unmute yourself if you like.
I did that. And can you give me 8 minutes given the people that have seated? Okay. If you can go to slide 2 right away, I would appreciate it. As Steve mentioned, our goal is to share the results of the
Excuse me,
Nope.
Ms. Fagan.
Yes.
Excuse me. Our rules require that the people who are donating their time to you indicate that they're doing that.
How do they do that, Larry? We did that via email.
I am donating my time. I'm donating my time. Theonism.
Karen Honer, I'm ceding my time.
Okay, we have it all? I think so. So
Renee,
Hello,
can you cede your time too, please?
I'm ceding Renee Coleus. I'm ceding my time.
Thank you.
So can I have my 8 minutes, please?
Yes. Wind the clock back to 8 minutes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Only because it's going to take me that long. Okay, but I'm going to try to be quick. As Steve mentioned, our goal here is to share the results of the survey that we did in the Southgate neighborhood, as well as some insights that we learned from those results. And as he also mentioned, we spent time distributing flyers to every household, including apartments, and posting on Nextdoor to make sure that, nope, go back one, please. That every household had the opportunity to participate. Our process was to ask people to email a Southgate 2020 address, provide their name and house address before sending the survey so that we could ensure participation was from Southgate residents only. And then we tracked that participation on a zoning map and strove for broad-based coverage on each street. You'll see that zoning map shortly. We also understand that this is a complex issue, as already noted here, with many differing points of view, and not everyone is up to date on all facts. So we did share an email with information that all pointed back to connecting Palo Alto and the great work that XCAP has already done. Last but not least, we shared these results, as have been mentioned, and with you as well, XCAP, and we would encourage you to read comments. Next slide, please. So participation, if you can go to the next slide, thank you. Participation was strong at 59% of all households in Southgate. A few things to note. First, you'll see there's strong distribution across the neighborhood. Also, there is a caveat at the bottom, which is Churchill residents close to the intersection all responded. Well, 88% of them responded. But the other end of the neighborhood near El Camino, there are a series of 8 duplexes that did not respond at all, despite repeated outreach. Thus, 44% from Churchill. I just thought that was important to note, given the comments. Next slide, please. This is the zoning map that I spoke about earlier. We used it to ensure that the respondent addresses were both part of Southgate, and we also kept track of the distribution to try to make sure that it was well distributed across the neighborhood, as we thought that was really important. Also note, on the right, it says there are 138 individual responses from 122 households. I'll explain that on the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is a little complicated, forgive the detail, but while we strove for 1 survey per household, there were actually 16 responses where 2 people from the same household responded to the survey. Thus, the difference between 122 households and 138 responses. They were also equally distributed across the neighborhood and made up a total of 12% of those responses. And just as a note about the distribution, 11% of those what I'll call doubles came from both Churchill and Mariposa, which is consistent overall. It's also kind of an interesting note that 50% of the doubles had differing opinions within the household, but that's another, it doesn't matter. Next slide, please. Now we're going to start looking directly at the results of the survey, which are reported here directly out of SurveyMonkey. So you will see that in the bottom right, the number of responses is 138, as mentioned earlier. This is a simple question. 88% of Southgate residents were aware of the proposed changes to the Churchill intersection. Next slide, please. In addition to awareness, we thought it was important to ask, how informed did you feel about the survey or on this issue? Not about the survey, but on this issue. Only 4% felt uninformed, and one person actually dropped out of the survey at that point. 96% felt at least somewhat informed to very informed on this issue and continued on. Next slide, please. So as you can see, when faced with the question of whether people are in favor of or against the closure of Churchill, 36% are for, 56% are against, and 8% are as yet undecided. I do want to make a note here about the comments. And again, I will encourage everyone to read them themselves, but that 27% of the comments to this question actually reference being against the viaduct. Next slide, please. When given all three options and asked to pick their favorite, 54% chose the partial underpass, 9% chose the viaduct, and 30% chose closing Churchill. That's a 24% spread, 7% undecided, which I think is important. Next slide. So this is the same data that we just looked at, but I thought there was an important point to call out here, which is that when asked, you may note that this 30% is less than the 36% that said they were for closing Churchill in the previous question. When looking deeper, it turns out that 6% of those people who said yes, that they were for closure, actually changed their vote here to be to the partial underpass as their favorite option. We were also curious, and of course, more than half are in favor of the partial underpass. We were also curious if there were other trends. We did a little analysis, and indeed there were. Next slide, please. In the interest of data privacy, we are not showing the exact votes from each household here, but just those that voted. This is the same map we showed earlier. However, one trend was quite clear when we did our analysis. 3 blocks are driving more than 80% of the votes to close Churchill as the favorite option within the neighborhood. Churchill Avenue itself, that one end of it, as well as the 1,500 blocks of both Mariposa and Castellea. Alternately, every block, except for Churchill Avenue, has votes for the partial underpass. Next slide, please. Given that opening Castellea at Pierce Park has been brought up as a traffic mitigation in public comments, we thought it was important to take a pulse here. As you can see, 56% of the neighborhood is against reopening Castellea. And again, here I would point to the comments because there's a lot of passion around this topic. And if you decide to take it up, I think it's really important to look at the history and understand that when this was open, both Castellea and Mariposa were some of the highest accident rates in all of Palo Alto. Slide 13, next one, please. The last data point is a very simple one. 100% actually chose to stay on the email list. When do you ever see 100% of anything? But clearly this is a super important topic to all of Southgate. Next slide. In summary, participation was super strong on this survey at 59% and broad-based across the entire neighborhood. 56% of respondents were against closing Churchill, 36% were in favor. That's a 20-point spread. Of those in favor, 83% of those votes were clustered on 3 blocks in the neighborhood: Churchill Avenue, 1,500 block of Mariposa, and 1,500 block of Castellea. The viaduct is unpopular with most of the neighborhood, with only 9% favoring it. Our friends and neighbors on Mariposas are not the only ones who don't want that. More than half of the neighborhood wants the partial underpass. And this is truly important for the whole neighborhood. And one more plug to read the comments. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. That concludes our public speakers.
Okay, we will now turn to item 3, which is our consideration of the traffic report, which is labeled final, but it's been labeled final before. I think this time it really will be. So we're going to hear from our consultant, Mr. Black. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't have a slide presentation or anything. I do have the report that I could, share the screen if anybody has any questions. But I want to say that this update to the traffic report was extremely minor compared to the traffic report that you saw before. We fixed a couple of the headers that were incorrect. We numbered the pages. We kind of recast the language so that I'll call it partial underpass option for Meadow and Charleston includes a U-turn at the Alma Village signal as part of the project rather than as a variant. So the way the report is written, that's part of the project. But there's no new information in the report from when you saw it before. Just some, as I said, minor fixing titles and making sure it was reflective of what the current designs are of all the options. So for example, Peter with AECon gave us some new drawings or design images to put into the report so that we're consistent with the latest designs that they've come up with. So it was just, I would call it minor housekeeping items like that. So I know on the agenda, it seems like a lot of time may be available to talk about the traffic report, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that people might still have, but it's not, there's nothing new since you saw it before.
Gary, you're an optimist. We're really expert at using up time. So we'll have questions from the committee. Colleagues, questions?
Oh, let me, while people are thinking of their questions, let me say that I did receive an email today, or no, it was yesterday at 8 p.m. So I don't know if any others from the XCAP have seen that email. It's from a person by the name of Inder Manga, and was questioning the design for the slip ramp at Embarcadero and Alma, which is shown as, that slip ramp now is 24 feet wide, as the comment says. And right now there's a drawing in the report that shows that slip ramp would be 2 lanes under the, kind of reconfiguration plan. And the email comment was that doesn't really work. They don't really think that works for that immediate area to have that slip ramp be 2 lanes. Right now it's only 1 lane. And then the additional area, the additional width is used for parking and also for school drop-offs, some people mentioned. So we went back and double checked. We found out that yes, indeed, that lane, only 1 lane is needed. I don't know why the drawing shows 2 lanes. That goes back several months. And so I can't really remember why it was shown as 2 lanes, but it doesn't need to be 2 lanes. It can be just 1.
Are you going to make some correction to your report to reflect that, or what do you suggest?
We can make a correction and make it final. I did put a question to Peter whether he was able to redraw that intersection with just a single lane there instead of 2 lanes. So I think Peter's on the call, though.
Yeah, Gary, we could work with you on that. We could talk offline and fix that up for you.
Okay, yeah, good. So
Great.
that would be the only change. Larry, would be to revise that one drawing.
Okay. Questions from committee members? I don't see any hands yet. Dave? Dave Shen?
Okay. Actually, I just had a comment, and I was wondering if this is something we could all consider, is that when we're working on these documents, if there's some way to just record the changes that were made from a previous document to this one, that would be really helpful. I don't know if there's a sheet that says like versioning and said, oh, we edited this and this and this, but something like that would be really helpful, because it's hard to figure out, well, where was the old doc, which one was it? And then kind of go through the whole thing to figure out what was different. So I appreciate if you can figure out some way of showing the versioning and potential edits that happened between the two. So whatever you can do would be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Larry?
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so apropos of that, it would be helpful if the city staff could create a folder with links to the current versions of all the documents, because keeping track of them all myself, I mean, I try to do it, but it drives me crazy, to use a non-technical term.
Thanks, Phil. That actually sounds really good, because it is driving me crazy too.
All right, so Dave, I'll give you another, it's making me Meshuggah. I'll explain that one to you off.
Meshuggah, yeah, me too, yeah.
All right.
I'd like to add to that information is that we are updating the Connecting Web Palo Alto website, and all the documents will be current to the final accepted reports from the XCAP on that website.
Ripon, it would be useful for tracing purposes if you could have another archive called deprecated or obsolete or so we have traceability. But I think it's real important to keep that repository of current documents that we can all go back to avoid any potential confusion when we're writing up our report.
So the history of all the prior versions are typically contained in the agenda and items for each XCAP meeting. That's where we've contained them, so that they're, you can track it back and you can say, well, we met on this date on August 12th and we reviewed the traffic plan at this date. But then we're setting up an area where we're going to have the most recent, all the most recent documents, so you can see the current version.
That would be appreciated, because it takes a lot of overhead that I think if we all do it is unnecessary expenditure of all our time for that. And I think I've said all that I need to say about that.
Yeah, thanks. We're already on it.
Good deal.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a couple questions.
Let's go ahead.
One of the concerns that the neighborhood has is induced demand. Is if we get rid of this delay at the train tracks, will that make the route through Churchill more attractive? How could you study that? I mean, I know that you didn't study it this time, but if you were to do additional engineering, how would you go about studying induced demand?
So that was Keith that asked that, right?
Right. Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So I think, Keith, you asked that question before, and we did study induced demand on Churchill, and we have a Q&A document that's somewhere in the record. I don't know exactly where. Somebody from the city would have to say where that is, but the answer to that is in the Q&A document. And so you can go back and find it. I don't think I want to take time from the meeting to search for it now, but we did have an estimate of the induced demand on Churchill in there, and there was a description of how that was calculated based on how much additional capacity would be available if you did the say closing Churchill, for example. But the number.
So would you look at routes and say, well, for example, certain routes would go through Embarcadero and El Camino? And
it wasn't that sophisticated, Keith. It was just if the capacity is there, then this is how much could possibly use it. Whether they actually would or not, we didn't get involved in that, but they could, right? Because all of a sudden, like, you know, for example, if you opened up an additional lane on El Camino, how many people would drive on El Camino? An easy way to estimate that is just to figure out the capacity of a lane on El Camino and say that's how many people would drive on El Camino. It was the same sort of thing. Whether they really would or not, you know, we didn't get that far. But the number was fairly small, to be honest with you. It was like a, I mean, don't hold me to it, but it was like a 5% increase or something like that. It wasn't like you're going to double the capacity of the street or anything.
Okay. And I'm not sure if this question is for you or for Philip. So we talked about traffic calming. What could you do to prevent this from becoming a freeway? And I think Peter mentioned like bulb outs or things like that. How would the city handle that? Would they do a traffic survey now and then monitor the traffic? And if the traffic was increasing, would you look at speed? Would you look at volumes? What would you do?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And we have, you know, Ripon here, feel free to jump in if you have any comments, but we're actually developing, or we're redeveloping our program. We have a really, really old program for traffic calming that Ripon's going to be leading the development of a new program this year. But that said, yeah, we look at volumes, we look at speed, we look at before and after, and then we you know, make determinations for what different tools or you know, changes would be appropriate in order to you know, get the desired effect. So
how much work is this for the city to monitor this? Would you put just those pipes across the road, or would it take a lot of labor?
Yeah, so
I'll add some information to the traffic calming process in itself requires data collection at different points as it relates to speed, volumes, depending upon the situation or the problem that we are investigating. If it's a speeding concern, definitely a lot of speed data at different points would be of more importance. If it is a cut through traffic, then volumes at different locations would indicate the existing traffic circulation and how that are being impacted. So having that data helps. The question comes into the picture is as with time and with the growth of the city and other elements that are happening, there are going to be changes in traffic volumes all over the town at different times. May not be related to this project in itself, but just in general, traffic flows and circulations change over time, which is modeled through our traffic model. And that's how the model updates would also project what kind of those features are. So we definitely could keep an eye on it, but usually a traffic calming is initiated through a request as a process. And if this process, if this project, and we don't know exactly when the actual construction of these grade separation would begin, but if the community interest or the city's interest is to do that pre-project data collection, we could make that as a part of the project to do a pre-project data collection and keep that in our repository, and after the project is complete, then we can continue to monitor after the project is complete to see how those impacts the similar roadway that are kind of in the horizon or in our vision of evaluation on the impact. And so then we can do a pre and post a comparison to see what changes have occurred because of the project, and then look for some of those alternatives to mitigate some of those impacts. The mitigations could be a combination of features, including traffic circles, the neck downs and chicanes, and so all those others. And that's the part of another like Philip mentioned, our traffic calming program is kind of a little bit outdated, and we are looking into updating that one and include those measures in the program. So yeah, as these project measures, if the condition of if the XCAP and our future recommendations include pre-project studies to collect the volume so that to evaluate the, the diversion of traffic, then we could keep that in our, project scope.
How difficult is it? One of the concerns I would have is that we say, yeah, we could do that. And then when push comes to shove after this is built, then we'll say, yeah, we could, but we just don't have the manpower to do it right now.
So yes, that's why I was saying that it could be part of the project scope rather than the city staffing, because city staffing don't have the equipment and the necessary resources, and it all depends upon the scoping of how far you want to do the data analysis. If you are looking at 1 or 2 streets, it's easier to do it in a short period with the city staffing or some minor data collection. But if it is evaluating, say, 50 streets throughout the whole project area, then that becomes a bigger scope, which requires a bigger budget and of course more time and efforts that would require those kind of monitoring.
If I can, Ripon, that was great. I just want to chime in that I want you to know that I would say that it's not prohibitively difficult in order for us to do it. As we know this project is coming, we would prepare the necessary resources to do that. And just so you know, it's something that we regularly do. We're getting ready to roll out a pilot in the Crescent Park area where we do very similar kind of traffic calming, and Ripon will be talking with the PTC and the city council on this exact type of issue very soon, dealing with cut through traffic, dealing with speed issues and all of that. So it's a regular activity that the Office of Transportation engages in.
And this is something that would be done in-house with staff, or would we have to hire consultants to do this?
It's typically it's a combination, but it's not something that we hire. It's something that we typically have consultants on call. So we use them regularly for this kind of activity to assist us. But a lot of it's done in-house as well. So it's a combination, but it's not something where if your concern is we would need to go out and find a consultant and get a new contract. No, it's something that the city typically retains on contract all the time because we have these kind of requests that we need to deal with on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
And our thought is, just so you know, our thought moving forward is that we would have we work through the council to prioritize which projects we move forward with. Because just so you know, the one resource issue that we have is that we typically get more requests for traffic calming than we can deal with each year.
I imagine,
so that's why I said we would have to plan kind of our resources, but obviously, if it became a priority or we believed it was a priority, we would prioritize it, and that would be where we put our resources.
Okay, thank you. I have one question for Gary about bicycles. In the report, you mentioned that bicycles were included in all your analysis, and so, for example, at Churchill, the bicycles crossing may prevent cars from taking a right turn. So all those delays were incorporated in all your calculations?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And so for bicycle, we have the LOS. Is the LOS here just generic to the intersection? So the bikes would have the same LOS as the cars, or I mean,
yes.
sometimes, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I cut you off. You can finish your question.
Sometimes, for example, at Charleston, bicycles can zip through because their lane isn't necessarily tied up, but there's a backup of cars. And so the LOS actually might be better for bicycles than it would be for cars.
That's correct. It would be slightly better than the cars.
But I've also seen at Churchill, when it gets backed up with bikes, it's faster for the cars to get through because there's so many bikes during the school rush.
The easiest way to think of it is that the bikes have the same delay as the cars. Because like you said, there's different factors involved, but just as a quick rule of thumb, I guess.
And so how would we, if we wanted to get better insight into the bicycle, how this impacts bicycle, what kind of analysis could you do to give us more insight into the impacts on bikes?
The impacts on bikes of doing which improvement?
And any of these, for example, if we were going forward with one of these, or we're doing comparing two, right now it seems like when I read through this, this seems like a vehicle traffic report and not a bicycle traffic report. And can you talk about just the impacts on the bicycles? And it just
well, the way to calculate the impact for the bicycles would be to look at the reduced delay that the bicycles would experience with some of these improvements. For example, if you put in an underpass at, not at Churchill, but what was the name of the street right next door?
Kellogg.
Kellogg, yeah. Those bikes would not experience any delay because they wouldn't see a red light. They would just go through the tunnel. And so you could compare that to the amount of time that they get delayed at the signal, which we do know how much time they get delayed at the signal. Same thing, say, with Charleston or East Meadow. We know how much time the bikes get delayed at the signal. And then if you put in the bike, I want to call it a tunnel, but kind of a channel there that doesn't go through the signal, it doesn't get any delay at all. So you can figure out, well, this is going to save on average, let's say, 20 seconds for bicycles or something like that. I mean, the delay savings is not going to be substantial no matter what, because the average delay is not that big a number to start with. I mean, when we're talking average, if you come along just when the light turns red, you have to sit there for a minute. But if you come along when it's green, then you don't have to sit there at all. So you average all the cycles together. I think the main, if I can editorialize, I think the main benefit for bicycles of what we're talking about with all these alternatives is a kind of a safety improvement, so they don't have to interface with cars.
So if we were comparing two bike tunnel locations, one at Kellogg and the one further south over by Pierce Park, how would you have, because we have streetlight data for cars, so you could actually look at demand starting locations and ending locations for cars, but we have no such way of getting that for bicycles, right?
Streetlight data can do bicycles. I don't know how accurate it is. I guess, don't all kids riding bikes have cell phones these days? Probably. So that's how.
They don't all.
They don't all. Well, they don't all have to, but that's how Streetlight gets their data off cell phones. So, and
but
they can tell whether.
Can you buy bicycle data from Streetlight?
Yes, you can, because they can identify bikes versus cars based on the speed. So they can tell whether, oh, this must have been a bike versus a car.
Oh.
So I just have to chime in and give some city perspective here on the streetlight data. We had one of our staff who's actually on the phone here. He's acting as co-host today. Do research on streetlight data and how useful it would be for the city. And frankly, we found some significant discrepancies between where we had done tire counts, as you talked about earlier, laying down the tubes. And we found really significant discrepancies between those to the point where we had an issue with feeling comfortable with using streetlight. I think that discrepancy would be even more significant if you were trying to use it for kids riding bicycles. So I'd be extremely concerned and very uncomfortable with doing that.
I'll say that streetlight data can be used to identify what we would call a routing pattern, but it's not at all useful to identify the absolute number of bicycles or cars, as Phil just said. Does that make any sense? I mean, you can, you can see a pattern, but you don't know how many are involved. Is this 10 bikes or is this 1,000 bikes? You don't know that. You only know, oh, they use this street or they use that street.
So if we're looking at
building, let's say we have money for just one bike tunnel and you want to know, do you put it on Kellogg? Do you put it on Churchill? Do you put it on Seal? How would you go about determining what would be the best from a traffic standpoint?
One way, and maybe Phil wants to jump in on this, but one way that I've seen that I kind of like is to look at Strava, which is a software that logs bike rides for bike riders. And you can get Strava data to tell you which streets bikes are using. And so if you want to like put investments where there's the greatest number of bikes, that's one of the sources that you can look at that I think is good personally.
Yeah, that might be the exercise bicycles, but the people who are commuting may not be using Strava.
That's right. And in particular, the school kids are very unlikely to use Strava. I would say even more unlikely. But that said, we are currently signing up to get the Strava data license. We do think it's a useful tool generally for collecting bicycle data. Beyond that, the other one is really working through our Safe Routes to School team, which is also in the Office of Transportation. They are really well connected to what the school bicyclists are doing, and additionally the pedestrians, people that are walking and biking to school. So I would say using that network to establish what the most the best, I should say, best routes to establish would be. And that's consistent actually with the Safe Routes, goals and mission.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Question?
Please go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, so I've got questions for both Philip Kamai and for Gary Black. The Philip Kamai question is there some kind of city policy or guideline that does trade-offs between what you might call improved service for cars versus improved service for bicycles, or a minimum standard of service for any class of transportation?
I don't believe there's something that establishes trade-offs between those. I think that our goal is to provide service for all. So complete streets, and I think that everything in our comp plan would encourage providing services for all.
Yeah. So my Gary Black question is there a level of service definition just for bicycles or pedestrians as opposed to vehicles as a way of relating levels of service for different modes?
Yeah, there are methodologies for determining levels of service for pedestrians and bikes. It's very data intensive, and it's not, in my experience, it's not used very much because it's kind of common sense kind of stuff, and you can usually make all the decisions you want to make regarding serving bikes and pedestrians without going through that exercise. So, for example, figuring out level of service on a street, you need to know how wide is the street, how many cars are on it, how many bikes are on it, how many driveways are there, what is the spacing of the driveways, and there's a whole bunch of other factors as well. What's the accident experience that go into the level of service? And most, in my experience, most cities have decided it's not worth the effort to go through that, because you can just look at it as an experienced person, yourself or anyone else, and say, well, this street is better than that street for bikes.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of a follow-up to what Keith was asking about a few minutes ago. That's why I'm asking those questions. All right, thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Yeah, hi. I actually.
Go ahead, Greg.
So two quick things. First of all, +1 on the Strava global heat map as a fascinating thing to look at, to see where recreational cyclists and serious commuters, of whom we have a lot in this area, go. And it really gives you a sense for like, oh, this road is used heavily by bicyclists and it must be a safe and good bike route. So for instance, when we used to talk about Palo Alto Avenue, that one is, a very bright color on the heat map. So it's a fascinating thing to look at, but I wouldn't call it a formal traffic study. I have one question for the traffic analysts. We've been asked a number of times by people this whole the whole process from time to time, why don't you just close Churchill for a few days and see what happens so that you can get some data and find out what that does to the traffic? And I have my own opinions on that, but I'd be curious to see what, I might have asked Gary this question before actually, but it keeps coming up. So I'm going to ask again, is there useful data to be had by closing Churchill for a while and seeing what happens?
Well, that would be, all I can say is that different cities and even Palo Alto have implemented, temporarily, changing the roads to see what happens before making anything permanent. So it's possible to do that. Whether there's any, will to do that within the city, I don't know.
So yeah, I'll just chime in really quickly that I'd caution against doing any of these partially, and that's what I think would be occurring, is that we would be implementing it partially if we were to just close Churchill, because really it's not the same as closing Churchill and implementing all of the mitigations that are necessary to make that actually function. So from a city perspective, if we were to try closing Churchill without the mitigations, it's very likely that the system would fail. So my suggestion is, if we were to try it, we would try it with the mitigations, but I don't know that that it's a large effort. That's kind of like saying, let's build part of the viaduct and try it and see how it goes. It's like,
and take a look at it and see if we like it. So yeah,
a little bit challenging.
Yeah. So, okay. And I also assume that you don't just close it and then let everyone make their own conclusion, but it would have to be accompanied with some sort of actual traffic study of people doing the counts before and after. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any good data.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Thanks. That's all I have.
I have a follow-up question on that. If you do close a street like this, people don't discover the new routes immediately. There'll be some trial and error, and so there'll be a learning curve. So you'd have to keep this closed for quite a while to make this a meaningful test, wouldn't you?
Typical, I'll just jump in and say typical tests that have been done in the past, for other cities where they've tried things like this, I would say at least 3 months, 3 to 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions from the committee. We want to give the public an opportunity to speak on this item. So do we have any members of the public who wish to address us on this?
Yes, we have 2 people who raised their hands. The first is Ken Joy, followed by Drew. I'm going to allow Ken, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity to raise questions about this. I would first like to respond to a comment that was made briefly that if there was a partial underpass at Meadow or Charleston, that bicyclists would not have any delay at all, and that it would be a safety improvement because they wouldn't have to interact with cars. I just want to point out that the current design does involve some rather convoluted movements for bicyclists, which would be particularly challenging for people riding cargo bikes. And it also has raised some questions about the viability of having all bicyclists move to, for example, the north side of Charleston Avenue. So the safety improvement is possibly in doubt. The question I'd really like to ask, though, about the traffic report is whether it's the case that Wilkie Way would not be impacted at all. I tried searching through the latest version of the traffic report that was posted with today's agenda. I see no mention of Wilkie Way. Now, it could be that something is being addressed by having a U-turn near the Alma Plaza. I didn't have a chance to read the traffic report carefully, but I believe that Wilkie Way, being part of the Palo Alto's designated bicycle boulevard network, is something worthy of consideration, and the fact that it's not mentioned at all in the traffic report raises some concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Drew, followed by Jason. Please unmute yourself, Drew.
Hello there. I wanted to say thank you for the update in the traffic report. I think last meeting talked about an arrow was in a place that was physically not possible to make a turn at Kellogg and Alma from the partial underpass. And I believe that's been rectified in the current version. So thank you for that update. Just want to say thanks for that. And also wanted to say thanks on the layout for Meadow and Alma. There was some minor tweaks to the graphics since you don't have an agenda item for that later, but just want to say thanks for listening and making these minor tweaks on the graphics and things.
Thank you. Next we have Jason Steinson, followed by Rob Levetsky. Jason, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. So, hey, I just wanted to go back to the point that Keith brought up about the inducement on Churchill. I couldn't find, I think Mr. Black mentioned that there was a Q&A from Hexagon that talked specifically about the inducement on Churchill. I couldn't find that. It went back through all the stuff. So if you could make that available and put a pointer to it. I think we had an earlier discussion about not being able to find documents. That would be great. I know on July 22nd, which is just a few weeks ago, Nadia and Gary had a long discussion on inducement. And at that point, Gary, you'd said that we didn't have inducement evaluated on Churchill. So I also specifically looked in that area between then and now to try to find it. I couldn't. I know clearly Hexagon has evaluated the inducement onto Embarcadero and Alma in the case of a Churchill closure. That's kind of a baseline requirement. You have to do that because that traffic has to go somewhere. I just haven't seen anywhere where there's been an evaluation of if we improve Churchill's traffic flow, whether that would bring more traffic in. And today's discussion was surprising to me just because it was so different than the same discussion we had 3 weeks ago. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that deeper dive from Hexagon on how they evaluated the inducement of more traffic. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Rob Levetsky. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Rob Levitsky. I live at the corner of Embarcadero and Emerson. And I just want to repeat over and over, there's 9,500 cars that were crossing Churchill during the heyday of a year or so ago. And I don't understand how you think that you can make things better by jamming probably 2/3 of those cars to Embarcadero and 1/3 to Oregon, being that it's 9 blocks to Oregon and it's 3 blocks to Embarcadero. So of the 9,500, approximately 6,000 to 7,000 cars a day would be jammed on to Embarcadero, where you're adding at least one signal on Embarcadero to slow things down. Anyway, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the smell test, and it's not fair to close Churchill and dump all those cars onto Embarcadero, which is currently a functioning underpass. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes all our public speakers.
Thank you. We proceed now to item number 4 on the agenda, XCAP updates, referring primarily, I think, to our chapters that we're preparing with regard to our final report. Let me start off by saying, since we've gotten a number of emails from the public, well, 3 or 4, I guess, and other people as well, as to what's our process here. So far, we have received first drafts of chapters 1, 3, 4, and 6. By drafts, I want to emphasize they're drafts. That means that they are not the positions of the full committee at all. They're the opinions of 1 or sometimes 2 people. And they have, with the exception of, well, no exceptions yet, they have not gone through a complete editing process either. So do not despair when you read something and say, oh my God, is that what they're really going to say? Well, not yet. We have a lot of work to do. And Phil Burton has accurately pointed out that the committees he has served on in his career almost always fail to set aside enough time to really work on what their written report's going to be. And I hope we don't do that, but it is going to be a difficult process. So I start by saying that just so that people don't get too excited about one or two sentences here and there that they think are incorrect. It's too early in the process. But having said that, we need to move it along as fast as we can because it's a lot of work and we haven't even gotten to the point where we're going to be accepting comments from the rest of the committee or members of the public. So maybe we want to have let me give you an update of what I've been seeing on it. I referred to the reports that we've had, the first drafts that we've gotten so far. And we have, I think that's led me at least, and I've talked to Nadia a bit, but she's otherwise occupied, as you all know, I think we're going to, given what we've received, it makes me think that we have to revise what the outline is of what the report's going to be. For example, Dave Shen and his colleagues have been working on what we call Chapter 2, and I've edited the first draft of that, and Dave's responded and go through another process. But it led me to realize that what Dave was working on really were two different things, and so I think that his work really becomes, whether you want to call it Chapters 2 and 3 or Chapters 2 and 2A, whatever it is, but it covers more territory than I think we initially assumed. Having read some of the other things, it became clear to me that we need to have an introduction that sets forth some of the definitions and why we're here, so that those things don't have to be repeated over and over again as we go through the report. For example, the history of XCAP, several people have started out their drafts with a history. Well, we only need to set forth the history once. So that's my background on it. Maybe each of you who want to give a status report on where you stand with regard to what you're preparing. Volunteers. Tony. Oh, one other thing before that. I think that one of our areas we're going to have to work through is that we presently have two different drafts of Chapter 4. I don't know how that came about, but obviously Megan prepared something before she left, and Tony and Phil are working on something which is one of the exhibits to the agenda today, which is on the same general topic but takes a very different approach than what Megan had. Tony, please go ahead.
Larry, I'm just wondering how we can collaborate now that this document in very draft form, probably first of 4 drafts maybe or whatever, but how do we collaborate more so we get opinions and not waste time and do it only during these meetings? Can we now collaborate with more people?
Well, the placement of the report on the public agenda resets the Brown Act rules so that, for example, the Chapter 4 can now be talked about by 4 different people. Well, 3, the author plus 3 more. They don't have to be the same people as before. But in any event, we have that flexibility. We do not have the ability to talk offline with the whole committee. At some point, of course, when we feel that the draft is in good enough shape and has been polished so that the people working on it feel good about it, then we go to the full committee, and the full committee can make comments or criticisms or whatever. But I think we're some time away from that with regard to any of the chapters so far.
Okay, thank you. It's like making love through an interpreter.
Don't have the experience. Dave? You want to unmute? There you go.
Yeah. First, a quick update on Section 2. I had went through and rewrote it based on Larry's comments. Didn't make the submission deadline for today, but I will submit it for review next week. a question. So
by the way, I'll have some comments back to you probably probably tomorrow sometime.
If you can make them quick, I want to submit something. I have to submit it to Sarah by tomorrow in order to make the agenda.
It's usually okay on Fridays.
Yeah. Okay. I'll check with her. Okay. And then a question: is it within Brown Act rules to appoint, and I think it's got to be one person who will go through all the copies and ensure continuity, the development, the redevelopment of the outline, as you had suggested, Larry. Check for repeats of information so it doesn't go repeat over and over again. I mean, all this kind of overall stuff, I don't think it can be done by this committee, like together. It's just not possible to me. Is there some way we can appoint a single person who's willing to do that and can then go through it, and he or she could do it all the time or just for one round or whatever? But I think that's really needed for someone to give us guidance that we should take out these sections, not rewrite this, all that kind of thing. Thoughts?
I think that the one person that you have in mind comes at the end of the process, because we have to give that person the authority to make any of the changes. And the usual rule is that the person has the authority to make any of the changes you're referring to, but nothing substantive. So that the person, for example, couldn't say, that recommendation you have, I don't agree with it. So instead of saying yes on A, we're now going to say no on A. Or that's pretty extreme, but you can imagine lesser things. But the continuity of style and the elimination of repetitions and things of that nature, yes, I think we can and should, when we get down towards the end, authorize one person, presumably Nadia, to do that.
Well, since she's not here, I guess we can volunteer no matter what.
Hey, we just volunteered.
Right. Is there any way to do that earlier than later? Because it could also mean like, oh, it would feel better if this section had more information here. And it wouldn't necessarily be something, I think, along the lines of what you're suggesting, like substantive or decision-wise. It would be more just, should we put more information on this thing? It's too light on this. I mean, those could also be part of that.
That's what Nadia was trying to do by dividing up between herself and me, going through the first drafts and editing, and probably second drafts as well before we bring it to the full committee. So that takes a fair amount of time. I guess.
Yeah, totally. Which is why we should start earlier than later. But yeah, you and Nadia are doing that partially, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other people on the committee.
Hi there.
Hey,
Hi,
Greg.
sorry. It seems like literal raising of hands is working better today, which is fine with me. I sent Larry and Nadia a draft of the safety chapter. I've lost track of what number it's supposed to be. And I'm kind of waiting to hear back what my next steps should be if you would like changes or anything. So just let me know.
Right.
And other than that, on some of the other sections, I mean, is there an opportunity like for the draft chapter 4? I assume there's an opportunity now to constitute a different group of people who would have comment rights on it and could do some work on it, right? I mean, would that be one way that eventually, if we shared it with the public periodically, we could eventually rotate the necessary chapters through enough people so that we don't have to have like a 18-hour conference call where we edit things?
That's a sequential meeting, I think.
Yeah. Well, my problem right now on chapter 4 is that we seem to be if I duplicate work on it.
We have 2 chapter 4s. Okay, that's a bigger problem. I don't know how to resolve that. So let me know what to do about the safety chapter, whatever number that is. And when I hear back from you, I will move forward. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Harry?
Did we talk at a recent meeting? I seem to recall this, but correct me if I'm wrong. Did we talk at a previous meeting about whether or not staff was going to be the person that pulls everything together? I don't want to rehash the discussion we just had, but is that something staff is willing to help with, or is this all on us?
I'm glad you raised that question. If you go back to our guiding principles when we formed XCAP, it said that staff would be working on the report. Staff somewhere along the line said, nah, we're not going to do that. The committee said, that was probably a good idea that we do the basic writing of the report. I think that Sarah Wilson has said that she'll be glad to do some proofreading as we get down to the end.
That's what I was thinking. Like we can draft and hand over the documents, and that part that I think Dave was bringing up of pulling it together into a cohesive document. I think that might be something that where staff's help would be super useful. Philip, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I do. I think actually we've mentioned this at previous meetings, but we will definitely help as much as we can. You know, we are definitely, you know, we'll make sure that nothing's, you know, there are no grammatical or spelling issues or anything like that, and we'll help you to pull the report together. And of course, provide any resources, you know, that we can to the report. So if there's something that you need help with, yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to the Office of Transportation.
Awesome. I'm glad you said that, because I wasn't quite sure if I was remembering correctly. So so then I think just do our best with the drafts and you know, ask staff to come in and turn it into a single document. Like I think it sounds like they're willing to help with that. So
So could staff send Phil Burton the chapter 4 that's duplicated than the one that he came up with?
It's attached to the July 20th agenda.
Is this Megan's version?
Sorry?
The chapter 4 Megan's version, or?
Yes, it's attached to the July 20th, our July 20th agenda.
Thank you.
Other comments? I don't see any. Sorry if you can hear my dogs barking.
Yeah, so Larry, that just goes back to my point earlier about having a central repository for all current documents. Clearly, I overlooked that.
Well, yeah, well, I think that you were sort of, I don't think it was clear what your assignment was, so I wouldn't.
All right.
But it's the problem, I think, is that Megan, of course, isn't here, and a lot of things have taken place after her.
Yeah, and she was such a valued contributor also.
Oh, she was.
I really miss her presence on the group.
Okay, anything else on this? Okay, we have one other item under XCAP updates and so forth, and that is that Dave has mentioned that having the meeting start at 3 is now going to be difficult for him because of his obligations to take care of his daughter. And I think you're suggesting that we move the start time back to 4 o'clock, Dave?
That'd be really helpful, given that PAUSD is going to start next week. I see 2 hands going up agreeing with me that it would be nice to get a little bit later so we can get our kids back and situated at home, and then we can hop on. Otherwise, we'll be continually late.
I do have my hand up, but it's just for a complimentary comment. PTC starts on some Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. So if we're planning to have a longer meeting and start later, and you would like to have my vote, participation in a vote, it may not be possible to do on some Wednesdays. Just FYI.
Just to add on to that a little bit, just note that also transportation staff has quite a few PTC member meetings that we'll be involved in coming up.
Well, okay, let's hear from Min Young. You had your hand up before?
Yeah, I think it kind of cuts the day, so I prefer to have it in the evening.
You'd rather have us meet at 7 o'clock?
No, but like maybe 4 or 5 is much better than.
Okay.
Carrie, which Wednesdays do you have meetings at PTC?
I believe it's the second and last of a month.
Last?
Second and last.
Well, sometimes they're 5.
Exactly. That's the confusing part. But I can provide the exact dates. Phil already has them. I don't know if we're how you want to make this decision. If it's going to be a poll or whatever, I could fill those in on a poll. But it's only a couple more meetings.
Yeah, could I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
There's a Phil and there's a Phil. I'm Phil. Phil Cam High is Philip. It would help me at least, maybe him too, if we kept that nomenclature.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Phil.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you, Phil and Philip. I will do my very best to
Let's start with
disambiguate.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's start with are people comfortable starting at 4 o'clock on the first and third Wednesdays?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's turn to the second and either the fourth or fifth Wednesdays. And maybe we'll just work with staff to see what we can work out to accommodate everybody. Maybe 3:30, I don't know.
Yeah, Larry?
Or
3:30 would be great.
Yeah, I'm very flexible because I don't have small kids. What is important to me, at least that we can publish the schedule at least for a few weeks out so I can plan accordingly.
I agree.
What if we took a look at the days where we're going to be, are we voting at every one of, I know we have clusters of 3 meetings in a row. Are we voting at every one of those?
Oh, no.
We
Depends
don't
on-
know.
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, you don't all have to work around my schedule. I just want to make sure we were informed of that going into this discussion about changing times.
Okay, so next week is the, what are we on? The next week is a third Wednesday. So we agreed that it would be at 4 o'clock next Wednesday.
Yes, for me.
I see no objections, so we'll go for it.
Is it
Sorry?
a regular meeting? Next week, it's a regular meeting. Do we have to do any scheduling concerns?
Yeah, I don't know if we can change the schedule.
Around noticing regular meetings?
Well, we have time to notice it because of notice.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, 3 or 4 o'clock doesn't make a big difference to me. Whatever works for everyone else.
Yes, same.
Okay,
Same with
4
me.
o'clock next Wednesday then. We'll go from there. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Our last agenda item is the staff report, particularly on the virtual town hall. So Philip, Riplon, whoever.
All right, I'll try to set it up. Share my screen.
Who's going to tell us?
I'll be just sharing my screen right now.
Okay.
So can you all see my screen? Stop share. Can you all see my screen? Connecting
Yes.
Palo Alto rail grade separation,
Yes.
right? Okay, so as you know, we are all preparing to launch our town hall for community outreach. We have discussed about dates in the past. It's going to be in the week of August 17th. So we are looking at launching dates on 18th, 19th. So more information to follow in next couple of days. But, you know, I think it's 18th or 19th that we are launching. And the virtual town hall will have features that kind of provides a good overall view of the different grade separation locations on one, and also try to give like an experience of a actual conference room. The center table will be the centerpiece where all the layout would be provided of all different location or grade separation locations. It's also like a virtual 360 static display, and they will also have you could move around. There will be a host to introduce, and also a city introduction video explaining how to utilize the website in itself. There will be a feedback poll that could be utilized to bring in information and questioning the visitors about their experience as well as their preferences on the alternatives. And so there will be questions as it relates to each alternative, as well as a question about general questions about the whole project in itself. Exhibit room, documentations, and media links will be other ways through which they will be all providing information in this virtual room environment. And I have a quick demo that I could share with you. This is an earlier version. The current version, we could not bring it in because they are working in the background right now. And I could not work on it at this moment, but the virtual town hall will provide you a kind of an experience where there will be a center board where all the grade locations will be displayed, and there will be pointers on it on the different viewpoints, different videos, 360 videos that will be on those on that center table. Up on the screen, there will be different renderings, fact sheets, all the animations that would be present for the different alternatives. And you could click onto an alternative and it will provide a more detailed information about the actual renderings, layouts, fact sheets, matrices. All the study reports will also be there. So let me try to see if I can launch this one. Oops. So you can see that this will be like an entry to welcome, and then will be an introduction animation from the city or introduction video with the greetings from the staff explaining about the town hall, and the introduction to the project, explaining about the different features of the project. And this is how one can just go into the conference room.
All right, we're Ripon, just so you know, I think we're not we're still seeing the slideshow.
Okay, let me stop share and then reshare.
Philip? Yeah, go ahead. Your question.
Could you, Larry, sorry. Could you explain why this is more participatory, or why does this technology help with greater understanding of participation?
So in the COVID-19 environment, we cannot do a face-to-face meetings. It brought up that we could have a virtual environment, and we are trying to set up as close as possible to a conference room environment that people are used to, with like tables and chairs around and having a screen on the front, and with all these like graphics that can be more elaborative on how and to get an access to that information, and be able to get all that information and provide us the feedback on their understanding of the problem, as well as the information that is presented to them.
Yeah,
So,
Ripon, quick question. What kind of phone or tablet or computer equipment is necessary to view these displays productively and clearly?
Phil, can I take that question after I
Sure, that's fine. I just want to raise it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. No, that's a great question. To go back to Tony's question, I just want to also add that one of the benefits that we do get in this is it's unlike a town hall meeting that we've had in the past, where we have, the meeting is on Thursday night from 5 to 7 p.m. or whatever. We're planning to leave this up for around 3 weeks. So it really gives people the option to access it at any time. And it's going to be a holding place and for all of our information. In addition, we've done some things like, and we're not complete yet, but nearly complete, providing narration, talk-throughs of the construction staging and animations, which I think is going to provide a really good benefit to the people that are not familiar with the project. The way that it's laid out on the map, it's going to, I think, help people who are familiar with their neighborhood or whatever to orient themselves to the project. And additionally, we're planning 3 different live sessions spread out throughout this. One will be one that I'm going to be doing with a member of AECOM staff, which is going to be a tutorial video, which might not be necessary for somebody that's kind of fairly familiar with this type of project or this type of website, I guess. Although not that this website is really that common, but explain to them how they can look at the different things, how they can use the different tools, and how they can provide feedback. Because that's going to be one of the key things. We're going to have a lot of access points for providing feedback on the different alternatives, and then just overall. I don't know.
Thank you.
It's not exactly there, but yeah. And then we're going to have 2 separate meetings kind of spread out throughout this. They're going to answer questions that we've heard during the process, and deal with kind of a FAQ or Q&A items. So to answer that, I think that we're hoping that what we're going to get from this is a larger group of engagement than we have at the town halls that are kind of limited to those 2 hours and, spread out by several months. So, and then to answer Phil's question, it's going to work on essentially a web connected device. We've tested it down to 3G speeds. We were actually troubleshooting yesterday some issues that we were having with cell phones. Not that it's a real issue, but something that we need to explain is that if you're using a cell phone, you need to rotate it into landscape in order to get it to display in a version that's large enough for you to see. So that's something we have to include in our tutorial, and also something we'll include language on. But we've tested it down to 3G speed, which is fairly old technology for cell phones now. And it functions on 3G. All of the videos that we have on here are hosted through Vimeo, so they're going to have the Vimeo type buffering. So most computers and tablets and cell phones should be able to access this.
Yeah. So let me just mention one thing. There's been such rapid progress, say, in cell phone display quality that you might want to say something. I mean, this is purely an example. Best of you on an iPhone 6 and newer. And that's just as an example. If you can do that.
No, I don't think we should promote a product.
No, I'm just, no, not just Apple. It could be Apple, Android, or a phone that's newer than, say, 2012 or something like that.
I think what we talked about providing what the limitations would be. So I'll see how granular we can get in that. But we did talk about minimum requirements for operating it. So I'll talk with AECOM and see how much we can get.
Yeah, and a lot might depend on what the vendors, the ultimate vendors of this product have done in terms of their recommendation. We could just flow those through.
I think we can recommend that the best experience, you use your PC or Mac or computer or something like that.
Oh, of course, but not everybody will.
Of course, you can certainly go on to these devices at your time, within your time.
But the great thing is it's not required, because I was able to access everything through my cell phone. So I was really impressed. My cell phone operating on LTE, everything was fast, crisp, looked great. So I was really pleased with that.
Yeah, so just one final point, and then I'll shut up. A little bit earlier today, we talked about the idea of a centralized repository for all current documents that are public. can we have a link to that repository through this virtual town hall?
Yes, all the links on the, first of all the documents will be available on these on the virtual town hall website for your viewing, but they will be also referencing back to Connecting Web Palo Alto website, which is also have all the information on that.
Well, I'm going to say this, that when we go back to even in-person town halls, it might be useful to have some of the stuff running in the background or, behind some of the tables as additional resources. This looks very, very compelling.
Yeah, and there's a lot of data and information that can be all stored and presented in that. So, and also it gives you flexibility, like Philip said, that you can have, you can view it at any time of your day and any location. You don't have to be physically present in a particular location at a certain time. So this definitely gives you more flexibility and caters to a more more audience. And also all of these, a lot of the reading can be done using the, your or other virtual assistants audio modules as well. So.
Yeah, great point. And yeah, I just want to say as much as to add on to your statement about this being visually compelling, this is a draft product. The finished product looks so much better than this. So I'm really excited for you all to see it.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot more information that is going to be catered. This is just more like a demo model, which have like a quick setup to show some relevance to our project. But the actual working model is going to be a lot more elaborative and a lot more information. So all the traffic study, noise report, Caltrans emails, all the information, layouts, renderings, fact sheet, matrix, all the information will be presented in some format in those and navigatable way. It's very intuitive for someone who is a computer, literate and computer, which is most nowadays in this Silicon Valley area. So most people will be able to just jump on it without much assistance and be able to intuitively figure out and play with it in a few minutes to access and understand the whole site location. And there will be feedback options and questionnaires from time to time at different times that would prompt you for some kind of feedback to that will help us capture what people have learned and what they feel. So I think that is kind of a overall view of our virtual room, but it's pretty soon going to be live, and we're all excited to have participation from Palo Alto community to make sure that we have the valuable information for making better decisions in future. That concludes my update. Do you have any other questions? I'm available.
I do.
Hold on, Dave,
Oh.
Dave, and then Carrie.
No, I think Carrie had her hand up first, actually.
Oh, actually, anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, Dave. I love it. It's beautiful. We're so lucky to have technology like this to be able to offer. Rupan, you just mentioned that there may be some portion of our community who can't access it. Do we have alternatives for them? So I'm thinking, for example, does this software have the ability to, for screen readers to access it, or for people who may not even be able to log on if they don't have a computer or a modern cell phone, smartphone? What are they able to do in terms of becoming informed, or is that just somehow not available to them?
Unfortunately, that's the limitations that we have in this this post-COVID environment, because the physical interactions are going to be limited. And like your virtual meetings at PTC or the city council meetings are virtual, so all the interaction days are getting into more virtual environment.
Well, they can use the phone for those meetings.
So yeah, so if they have
for visually impaired or no smartphone, we're both able to access those.
So yeah, I just want to chime in really quickly. There's software for visually impaired, which can read documents. And so what we had talked about, and this is kind of the place where we decided earlier, before this came up tonight, that we would have a location on Connecting Palo Alto where we house all of the documents that will be used in this town hall and all of the up-to-date documents.
That's
So
great.
that would be the place where somebody that can't go into this virtual town hall could go in and have their, I can't remember what it's called, but voice reader. There's several different products that do like text to voice and can actually provide that. Unfortunately, it's difficult for us to provide physical copies of all of the documents during this time. It's the same issue that we have actually with XCAP meetings, for instance, where we put everything on the website and leave it to people to print it out if they want to print it or to download it to their computer. But we will have call-in options for our 3 meetings that we'll have. There will be a introductory video which will have a description of or some background on the project and where we're at. Those will all be audio, but all of the documents will be housed on the website with the ability to do that. So
And linked from here, like Phil mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I think it's just really important to lay that out, because I know you are trying to make everything as accessible as possible. So I wanted to make sure people knew what their options were. Thank you.
Yep, thanks for that question.
Dave, your turn.
Thanks. First, I just want to say, very impressive. This new VR stuff is very cool and very flashy, and it. I'm sure you have a lot of reasons for wanting to do it this way. But as a guy who worked in as a user experience designer for a long time, I just want to say that a lot of times we have to really appreciate what we're trying to get across and what the medium can support and what we're really trying to do. Like, to me, this thing would be awesome if everybody had glasses, right? And we walked around, right? And that'd be awesome. However, if we're only viewing it through a 2D screen, some people might get that experience and some people may not. Or some people maybe choose not to because they were expecting a 2D interface, but yet here's a 3D environment. And it's probably even faster for someone to find something in a list when they scroll down because it's a 2D medium versus trying to navigate a 3D thing, go, where's this thing? And I have to walk around this table thing. And so I'd urge you to really consider, if you're going forward with this Flash, awesome. But I would really, echoing a little bit of what Phil said and what Kari said, is to provide an alternative, which basically is just simplified page of just stuff that is shown here, but it's just basically links to them one at a time, because a couple reasons. One is someone might just choose not to do this. I go, well, what's this room? But they can just click on the link and go, give me the list, right? And they can step through one by one and not worry about this. Another one is a real limitation, because when I worked in this industry and we put up the latest flashy stuff, when one guy goes in, it works great. 2, 3, 50, 100, it often craters from bandwidth and load very quickly. And whenever you talk to your vendor, they will always say, oh, we can support 1 million people on it at one time. And to be honest, I've never seen that come true, no matter who it is. And so my caution is that you may have this, and then during the town hall night, it will slow down and crank down so hard that no one will be able to see or do anything with it. And that's my fear. So I would urge you to create some backups, basically a page that someone can jump to that basically just links to everything separately. That also links to potential people who can't access it, right? All of Kari's talked about, like accessibility and all sorts of other ways of getting at it. And it also saves you in case there is a technological problem. That bandwidth might be happening on their end. It may happen between you and the cell phone, right? Me sitting in a certain place in my house in Palo Alto may have terrible reception to stream a 3D environment into my phone. But if I just happen to be in another place in my house, actually it would be okay, right? So I mean, you never can tell the myriad of permutations that the user may experience this at. And I really urge you to figure out all the different potential technical things, right? And also the different ways that people can still get at it and still see everything and not necessarily have to go through a visually impressive, but also potentially confusing interface.
Yeah, so I think as staff has said, we plan to have a place where we will have all of the documents listed, and all of them will be on the Connecting Palo Alto website in one location. So I think we've got that contingency. I just want to speak really quickly to the comment that you made about everybody attending the town hall at once. And I think that's where I just want to make sure that we're not missing that there's a limitation to having a town hall from 5 to 7 p.m. on Thursday, that not everybody can make that. This one, we're not saying come at 5 to 7 on Thursday. We're saying come anytime. We're open for 3 weeks. So really, if there were some bandwidth issues, which we're not anticipating, but and hopefully AECOM's got that covered for us. Somebody could come back at any time. So I'm expecting that we're going to get some interesting information about people visiting this at 3 a.m, people visiting it at, in the morning, people visiting in the afternoon, and people visiting it in the evening. So it's going to be interesting to see that. But this is really there's trade-offs between all these different options. And I think this is how we've decided that we can best move forward in this post-COVID environment. It's the same challenge that you might have with this meeting, is we might actually have people that are only able to dial in and actually can't even see this virtual meeting room right now that we're showing. There are limitations, but I think we're trying to keep moving forward through this, and frankly, trying to hopefully reach a bigger audience than we've reached with some of our recent town halls, where we've had that time limitation and people have to decide, well, am I going to go home and have dinner with my kid, or am I going to go to this meeting? So I think there's challenges to any way of going through this.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Phil, no. I have 3 questions for you. First one, I heard 2 different dates, and I'm sorry if I didn't get it right. When is this going to go live? Is it Monday or next Wednesday?
Sorry, I had to turn on my light. It's getting dark in here. I believe that it's scheduled to go live on the 19th, which is a Wednesday. We are not doing it on Monday because we want to be around to deal with any potential technical issues.
Okay, that's fine.
So I believe it's scheduled for the Wednesday.
Okay. That's fine.
Is that correct? 19th is Wednesday? Yes.
You have a time it would go live?
I don't think we've got that nailed down yet.
Okay.
I think there's going to be more communications coming up pretty soon. As soon as we finalize that date and time, we would let the XCAP know.
Good, thank you. Which gets me to my next question. What's our publicity for this? How is the public going to know about it?
So our communication officer and communication department is working on that. Of course, that's one channel through which we are utilizing different resources, social media, city's website, and the mailing list and other elements. But also as part of this network that we have created through XCAP and Payback and PTC, once we know of the final date, we will provide that information through different media, members of our society who can also decipher this information to our community.
Well, I'm concerned that we're a week out and the public doesn't know anything about it until people have heard about it who are watching our meeting today. And you've missed, or just about to miss the deadline. I think you have missed the deadline for the Palo Alto Weekly.
I just want to come back to the fact that this is not going to be open for, it's not just occurring on the 19th.
Yeah, I understand.
It's going to be open for 3 weeks. So we're going to be inviting people to go at any time during those 3 weeks and play with it as much as they want to, interact with it. So Yeah, it's going to be live on the 19th, but that doesn't mean somebody has to do it the first second. In fact, that kind of comes back to Dave Shen's point, is that we maybe don't want everybody to join on the 19th, you know, to necessarily overwhelm it. But I think that
I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, but I guess what I would say is that our communications officer feels that too much lead time wouldn't be appropriate for this type of a project, and she's got a planned schedule for how she's going to release the information and how she's going to, you know, get it on Nextdoor and Facebook and all that. So yeah, and that said, as Ripon mentioned, I think we'd like to ask you to help us share information. So as soon as we have it, we'd like you to help us to share that information as XCAP members.
How about Palo Alto Weekly?
About, I didn't catch that question exactly.
Palo Alto, like an article on Palo Alto Weekly or something like that?
We can check with our chief communications officer and see if that's something she had planned on doing.
Yep. Thank you.
My last question was, at the bottom of the screen where you were showing the virtual room, it said polling. I'm assuming this is just polling by AECOM, not for us.
So that whole thing is totally changed. That whole bottom of that screen, sorry, that's totally a draft room. That's not what you're going to be seeing final. There is going to be something down at the bottom that's going to be an option. Oh goodness, I don't remember what that. Feedback, yeah. Feedback, which is actually going to be a survey and an option for people to provide feedback that we're going to ask people to participate in. That's going to be one of those things where you saw the polling. It's essentially where that thing that you said you saw the polling. It's going to be like that.
So yeah, this is a demo version that shows different options versus the actual one. The actual one will have a lot more information, which is more catered towards this project itself, more relevant for this project.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Don't see any or hear any. So I think that's the end of this item. Anything? Oh, well, I'm sorry. Philip, any other staff reports? Ripon?
I think that was it from us at this point. Thank you. So all the information on the Connecting Web Palo Alto website, we are planning to update it by the end of this week. So all the links and all the layouts, renderings, reports, and other things should be pretty updated.
All right, I think that finishes item number 5. Do we have anything else that committee members want to bring to our attention? Don't think so. I think we're ready to adjourn, so we will meet again.
Larry?
Yeah, Phil.
Sorry, just wanted to note that we do have an attendee with a raised hand, a member of the public. I'm not sure if we wanted to open this item for public comments.
Well, in transparency, yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay, this is Jose. We're going to allow Ken to talk, followed by Karen. Go ahead, Ken.
Thank you. I just want to mention that when I've attended town hall meetings such as this in the past in person, some of the input I provided has been informed by what other people attending have said or asked. And so the question I wonder is whether this virtual town hall would allow me to see what other people have commented upon. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Karen. Please unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, I was very interested in the survey or polling portion of this virtual town hall and how it's going to be designed, because the presentation by the Southgate neighborhood doing their survey was quite impressive. They spent a lot of time on their questions. And designing the survey, who's designing this survey, and will it take into account what XCAP has talked about, various personalities, you know, if you live near the train, what neighborhood you're in, whether you're a bike rider and so forth. Will for example, the survey required that somebody put in their address so that you know where the people who are commenting on, say, if you're commenting on Churchill, but you live in Fairmeadow, would that have a different weight? That's a whole question about concern, given the short-term time frame between now and then, how much XCAP input is there going to be on the polling design? Thanks.
Larry, if it pleases you, I could respond to
yeah, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was that? The first question was, I'm blinking on Ken's question.
Whether people can see what other people have asked.
Oh, yes. Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry. So that's actually the intention of us having 2 meetings in between that I mentioned as live meetings, but there'll be live meetings which anyone can go watch at any time because we'll be recording them, where we'll be addressing questions and questions that we receive. So we'll be, essentially dealing with questions that we get during the process and responding to them. So we'll have one. The first one is currently scheduled for the 27th. And Ripon, do you remember the date of the second one?
I believe it's September 3rd.
September 3rd. Yeah. And to answer the second question, we've designed the survey and the feedback forms in kind of a similar way to how we've done at the previous town halls. But we've also, it's a little bit different because what we're designing is one where we'll collect feedback after each alternative is looked at. So if you look at an alternative, we'll ask you to provide your feedback on it. Then at the end, that area where Larry mentioned where there is the polling, we're going to provide a feedback location, which is going to give us a lot more feedback, a more kind of thorough thing. And yeah, we're not going to ask for your specific address, but we're going to ask which neighborhood you live in. And so yeah, we're hoping to get some data about where people are coming from and several different indicators for information.
Let me add that I don't think that the city's policies are that in general, the city does not require people to give their addresses when they're testifying before the city council or it's sort of to preserve democratic principles. So if people want to volunteer it, that's fine. But if somebody refuses to, then the city can't make them do it.
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, we find that typically we get more information when we ask for something like neighborhoods rather than a specific street address, where typically what we find is more often than not, people do not want to put their specific street address.
Okay. Other questions? Oh, excuse me. I think that's the end of, do we have any other members of the public who want to speak to us on this? I don't see any.
I have Karen Kalinsky as the last speaker. Please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Didn't she already speak?
Yeah, yes, I did already speak. I wanted to follow up on the answer that was given.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, can't do that. Okay, sorry.
Okay. So that concludes our public testimony. And I think that concludes our meeting. Have I missed anything? No? All right. See you all next Wednesday.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you all.